All right, how's everyone doing? I am Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning into the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? So what I want to get into today is I'm going to actually call this Stop Being a Phony. Now, that does not mean by any means I'm calling you a phony or somebody listening to this. That's ridiculous. But what I am going to get into today is I think a lot of people, more than ever on social media or even publicly, are acting like phonies, and it's exhausting me. And I really learned this when I was trying to break into the film industry, and I think that was one of the reasons I had a problem trying to break into the film industry or even spending long periods of times in LA. And I'm not taking people in LA are some of the nicest, most wonderful people I've ever met. I will say on record, I don't think a lot of people realize, and I've been to a lot of award shows, and including the Emmys numerous times, and big events. I'm not going to get into all that, but I think a lot of times people judge actors, let's say directors, writers, producers, look at them a certain way because of their politics or maybe some things they say publicly, but for the most part, I got to say, very nice people. But there are also a lot of phonies out there, but a lot of phonies get a lot of shit done, right? I get it. A lot of salesmen, a lot of people we're surrounded by, we know there's a phony aspect to them, and it works for them. It makes them either successful, it builds relationships, friendships, whatever. We can also see that in politics, in religion, public figures, all these different types of things, because you're seeing, as time goes on, more and more, a lot of these people being exposed, not being who they say they are, not following the rules that they claim you should follow or that they are following, blah, blah, blah. But fuck them. Let's focus in, I'm just going to say, on you. And you know what's interesting? I didn't make this podcast. I actually want to do more comedic stuff, which I keep saying I'm going to do. And I got to do. But I just kind of got to get off my chest when I'm doing these podcasts, these one-offs, I guess you could say, on certain subjects, because they've been in my head for so many years. I just want to, if somebody wants to listen to them and take my advice, they're welcome to it. If they want to dispute it, I love that as well. But the one thing I want to talk about phoniness is that a lot of people, and I'm not sitting here telling you that if you're at home farting and you talk a certain way at home, you may be loud or obnoxious or whatever the hell. I'm not telling anyone to go to work and behave, like they are in different environments. And that's not what I mean by phoniness, because I think no matter where you are, to a certain degree, there is a code of conduct. So I was at a wedding this weekend. Of course, I'm not going to act like, if I'm at a wedding, like I'm going to act like I'm at a sports bar with my friends, hypothetically, right? We're going to act differently. Or if I'm in church, I'm going to act differently than I'm at dinner, right? I mean, it's just kind of common sense. I'm talking about making people think you're someone you're not, or always kind of bullshitting, manipulating, or lying. I'm here to tell you, most people already know you're full of shit. You're just the one probably who hasn't figured it out. I'm going to tell you that right now. Hold on, let me get some water. Most people I think a lot of times, that everyone likes them, or a lot of people like them. Or, on the flip side, they think everybody either bullies them, which could be or hates them, or shuns them, right? It seems like it's one or the other. Because I think also with social media, a lot of us are like, well, I got all these friends on Facebook or Instagram, or I don't know, I got all these followers on Twitter, on LinkedIn. I got, so many people I'm connected with. Whatever the case may be, I think that brought a lot of comfort to a lot of people, no matter what they say. And when they post something, they get a lot of likes, right? A lot of comments. A lot of people feel good about themselves, and they should. I have nothing against that. That's on them. But again, what I'm saying, even on a social media presence, is they're pretending on social media there's something they're not. Now, I think no matter who we are, at times, we are going to break our own rules. And you could see that in relationships a lot of times, especially when cheating. I think a lot of men and women are very loyal to their husband or wife, or in relationships. But as time goes on, maybe one cheats. That doesn't mean that we're always cheating. But my point being is they broke their rule. And that could go it reminds me of food or working out or anything. Like, I'm going to work out this many days a week, or I'm going to only eat these type of foods. And it's almost like it's funny. You have a cheat day on some diets because it's kind of funny. But no matter who you are, I think a lot of times, there's no way to always keep up with your rules. Right? I think it's almost impossible, and I don't mean cheating. I'm just saying in general. You may always get up at 8 in the morning, and then one day you slept in. You broke your own rule. You may always go to bed at a certain time. You may always do something at work, and then one day you're like, I just don't want to do it this way. Try this. It may work, it may not, but sometimes we break our own rules, right? Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But I think no matter who you are, that's kind of how we evolve too, by breaking our rules. But back to the phoniness aspect of it, it's when you pretend that you're kind of perfect, or you're pretending that you make no mistakes, also is very aggravating to me, because I think life is all about mistakes. You probably make more mistakes than you do things right. People don't want to believe that, but I tell my friends, or I've told people my whole life, if you were as successful as you talk, you'd be a millionaire, at least a billionaire, right? Most moves you made, you think they led you to where you're at, and that made you successful, which some people are extremely successful. But this is for the average Joe really out there that's not that successful, or they're okay. But they'll argue with you on certain points. But it reminds me of people that pick, when I used to book and take people's bets, they all think they know who's going to win the game, right? Not only do they not know usually who's going to win the game, even if they got points or gave up points, whatever, even if they had the option of getting points, which means they get more points, they start off with more points at the game, they still lose. Because most people don't know what the hell they're talking about. It's a lot of shit talking. You will find, when you get around, at least in business, successful businessmen, where you immediately know they know what they're talking about. But a lot of us aren't surrounded by a lot of those people. And even if it's not business, it could be anything. If you love football, if you get around a really great coach, you're like, holy shit. Right? Or any sport. If you get around somebody who's successful at whatever that it could be even filmmaking. I'll just use, for example, when I was making films, there's so many people out there making films, but they weren't successful films. They may be incredibly talented as far as creating things, writing, but they never knew the business aspect of it. So the truth was, it's just a lot of, I can't say it's bad. I think anybody who makes a film, that's amazing. But I'm saying if you want to start making a career out of film, you have to realize it is a business first. If you don't make money on your films and you're losing money, how do you expect to make films? Now, if people are giving you free money to make films, God bless you. But most people aren't. But that's just another example I'm just using on this podcast. But back to the phoniness. I was going to do a podcast. If you got to act cool, you're not. And I think there's a lot of truth. I heard that once, actually. I think it was Greg Gunfield. Once I heard a quote by him saying something to that nature. And I found that quite interesting because my father said the same thing to me once as well. And it was very true because I think a lot of people they're acting a certain way when they're not really that person. And again, you can act any way you want. But I think what happens to people a lot of times is they start to take on a certain persona that it's not them after a while. And then as time goes on, at least as far as I've seen, before you know it, they're over their head. And before you know it, then they're miserable or something bad happens. Or they mislead others because of their bullshit and their lies or whatever their tactics are. Because there's a lot of people out there that they may not be criminals in the sense where they're doing something where it could be murder or theft or whatever the case may be as far as that goes. But there's a lot of people out there, I think, that are bad people that mislead other people and rip them off. As you know, even in relationships, constantly are lying to them. They may even put whoever they're with in a bad position, try to scam them out of money. All these different types of things. Now, if you're somebody here's my theory too. If you're around people like this, either you're one of them or you don't have the balls to get out of that environment. Now, if you were born in an environment of, I don't want to say con artists or people that are phonies or manipulative, and you have no other choice but to stay in a house where maybe your parents are that way, or maybe your brother, sister, friends, roommates, whatever, you're in a position where you can't leave that environment. But I'm telling you right now, if you are around those type of people, you're you're going to eventually, I think, end up in a bad situation. Now, you may not, but my friends that I grew up with a lot of times, I love all my friends, and I've been around a lot of people my whole life, growing up in a nightclub business, being in the bar restaurant business. I was friends with drug addicts, alcoholics. Even I've had friends that were put away for murder. I've had friends that got murdered. I've had all these different types of people. Now, the difference I think with me was, even though I was good friends with a lot of these guys, and at one time I was a bad influence, I should say, so let's flip that on me. At one time I was doing a lot of things that were wrong, and I thought they were right. But that's a whole nother podcast. But yeah, I was one of these assholes where that a lot of things I was doing was not right. But I never intentionally wanted to hurt anybody else. But I definitely was putting myself and others in positions where when things went down, it was bad. That's a whole nother thing. But as far as me personally not getting too close or wrapped up, because I do believe a lot of people have strengths and weaknesses. There's a lot of good and a lot of bad people, and there's a lot of bad and good people. But the thing is, there's a difference between being so engulfed or getting engulfed in someone's life that you know is heading into a bad place, or is making a lot of money. They may be doing it illegally. Now, anyone could kind of get caught in that life. And also, a lot of times you may not even realize your friends are, I'm not going to say phonies, but they're doing things that you don't even know about, that you may get wrapped up in. That can happen to anybody. But the ones you do know that are bad, and if you gravitate towards the bad and you become bad, that's kind of on you. But how was I going to word this? Me keeping being close, good friends with them, but not going full in with them, if that makes sense. There's a big difference between that. Because what I realized over the years is there's a big difference between having your inner circle, closest friends, and then you have a ton of other friends. And then you may be a type of person who bounces off of a lot of different friends. I kind of do that. And colleagues, I love everybody. I kind of will, even when I travel, see this one for dinner or that. But I'm not fully committed. I'm only fully committed to a few guys, right? It almost reminds me of, like, I'd hate to say it, but like the Chicago outfit, the mob. If you look at the New York mob, I used to look at how massive the 5 families were, the bureaus, all that. But if you had Chicago, it was a very tight-knit. And to get to me, there's only a couple friends that truly could get to me, right? A few, actually. And a lot of my friends, which makes no sense because of how I grew up and what I was doing. And then some of my closest friends are all lawyers, and a lot of them hang with judges, or they became judges, or they're dating judges, which is quite interesting, right? Because of how different I was than them. They all went to college to go to law school or accounting or businessmen. Then I went to Chicago and I went to Florida to work in nightclubs. And not nightclubs, to collect money in and out of nightclubs, bars, gamble, and do that. So I was complete opposite of them, but what I loved about that is I felt so safe around them to a certain degree. Now, I'm not saying all lawyers and judges are great people. They're not. What I am saying is they do, though, have a way of carrying themselves, and there's a lot of truth to them. Now, my oldest and closest friends my closest friend from first grade, he owns a boxing gym. So what's interesting is he hangs out with one of my closest friends as well that was a lawyer now. So it's kind of a funny dynamic how that kind of all works out. But if you are in a position in your life where you find yourself not being yourself, be aware of that. Also, if you find yourself in a position, and I've been there, where you're hanging out or you're starting to hang out with a lot of friends where they're doing things that you don't want to do or you don't want to be a part of, it's hard to break away from that. Especially if you're all intertwining, especially if you're younger and you're all going out, doing a lot of, some things you may all love to do. So if you're with your friends and you all love to go out to nightclubs, or you like to play on a softball team together, or you like to do dinner with them, right? That's wonderful. But before you know it, if they're doing things illegally and you're kind of attaching yourself to them, even though you may not be doing something illegal, just be very aware of that, because a lot of times you can end up in a position, you could be in a car with somebody carrying drugs. I'm just using drugs as an example. You may be at a party, and if you're not a drug user, let's just say, and somebody, a cop's coming to a raid, you could be at their house, you could be with them traveling. You got to understand, sometimes the positions you put yourself in, you knew the position you were putting yourself in, but you kind of played stupid, I call it. You can't play dumb in your life. And sometimes I think we do that. And that's part of the phoniness. I think when we become a phony is when we kind of play dumb, I call it. When we owned a vending business, my dad, and we would have guys that worked for us that would go out, and then we would catch them stealing. So then I would have to have a talk with them, and I'd say, were you stealing? And most of the times they would say never, which was understandable. But I said, okay, well, I'd have to prove, like, money-wise, what was going down, what happened. And they're like, yeah, I don't know how that happened because of I said, well, here's your option. You're either stealing it or you're too stupid to count money. Which option are you looking at here? Because then they were kind of in a catch-22. They're like, well, I just think they usually would say, well, I just think I'm making mistakes. I'm like, well, if you can't count money and split the money, then I don't know what use you are to me. So usually they would either just quit or I had to fire them. But life sometimes comes down to those simple choices. A lot of times is you're this or you're that. And I call it playing dummy. But you have to realize you are making all your own decisions at every moment. And you're also making decisions based on the people you're around, or you're allowing you to manipulate you or teach you certain things. And that's what I want to really get into, hopefully, with this podcast is it's not just about being a phony. I'm saying is pretending you're something you're not. It's almost people around you again, and how we allow phonies, I guess you could say, or people to kind of take advantage of us. That is on us, because a lot of times we know these type of people are bullshitters, liars, manipulators, but we go along with them for some reason or another. I don't know if we were programmed that way, but you don't always have to put up with that bullshit. You can confront them. A lot of times I have to do that with my friends if they want to do something, or my friends when I was, years ago, hey, I want to do this with you, Rich, or I want to do that. It could even be, I know it sounds crazy, like even pulling a heist or pulling something else. You're like, you got to think about it and go, no, I'm not down with that. And that's hard to do sometimes, even with, it could be even something legal, like, hey, I want to get involved with this real estate deal. Can you want to do it with me? You look at it, you're like, no. Because if you just don't trust them, or you just don't trust the deal. Because a lot of things are usually not as good as what it sounds like, right? I mean, people have to realize that usually when you get pitched something in life, most of the time it never works out the way you think it's going to. It may work out better, but usually it's never as good. It's kind of like a vacation a lot of times. We kind of like always go on vacation, come back and go, it was amazing. Well, if you go to an island and walk around, it looks beautiful. Was it really amazing? Maybe, if you've never been there. But if you've been to an island a few times, or a certain island, you're like, well, this is a sand, an ocean, and I lay around and I eat good food. Okay? But sometimes, I'm just using that for an example, things are usually not as good as what, they're pitched. And a lot of you being pitched is by people those are the ones that are going to take advantage of you, because the only ones that are usually going to be able to get close to you and take advantage of you are these type of people. So I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully you learned something with this. I hope I didn't confuse you at all. But really, I just wanted to get that kind of off my chest, because I don't think a lot of people realize when they're being a phony or someone else. And when I'm doing my YouTube channel, and the one thing I said I got to be, or my podcast, is who I am. I feel like swearing one day, I'm going to swear. If I'm on YouTube I want to do a video about a gym, I'm going to do it about a gym. If I want to do it about an Italian restaurant, everyone's like, no, Rich, you have this program. You got to basically just do it about confidence. You got to do it this way. And I'm not saying that would make me a phony, or you got to present yourself this way on the internet. I'm like, I want everybody to see me for exactly who I am at that moment. This is how I sound. This is how I look. This is how I dress. This is how I act. This is what I do. I don't want to pretend anymore that I'm a filmmaker when I'm not a filmmaker, hypothetically. I don't want to pretend I'm an author because I wrote a couple books. I could care less. I am not that, probably. I wouldn't mind doing some public speaking to help others if they want it, but I would be more of a Q&A guy. But all these different types of things, when you do a podcast, say, for instance, or YouTube, you're constantly exposing yourself. But I'm exposing myself for exactly who the hell I am. What's funny is my friends who listen to all my podcasts says, Rich, you don't swear that often. And I says, I don't feel a need to. But if I do feel like swearing that day, I will swear. Same with YouTube. They're like, oh, don't swear. Don't act like you don't give a fuck. And you know how with your attitude, this and that. Look into the camera. Make sure you do this. Make sure you get a perfect shot. Make sure your face is in every photo. I'm like, shut the fuck. And I get maybe that works for other people. And maybe that's what makes people successful on YouTube. Or maybe that's what makes a podcast successful, is if you have all these unique guests, which maybe I'll have one day, maybe I won't. But I can only be who I am, and I can only be comfortable doing what I want to do in my life. So if you're in that position as well, if you want to have a voice or do certain things and you're kind of afraid to do your own podcast, do your own videos, do whatever you want to do, you know what I mean? Don't sell yourself short. You'd be shocked at like you just being genuinely who you are, the response you're going to get. It's, I look at social media a lot of times, and sometimes, you put up all these, you put a picture up of you, your girlfriend, like I just did with my daughter at the Chicago Bears game, and of course, we're going to get a lot of likes. I get it. But it's funny because sometimes I'll put something up there that really means a lot to me, and I get a limited amount of likes. And I'm like, this is more who I am. Not that I love the Chicago Bears, but I'll like just comparing it to other things. A lot of people don't usually like what I like, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to post what I like, if that makes sense. So just think about that in your life. Do what you want to do, all right? Because you only got one life. So, all right, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you get a chance, you can check all my stuff out on richcelenza.com. What else do I have? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. What else? LinkedIn as well. So leave a comment. Agree, disagree, whatever the case may be, but please don't get caught up being a phony or being surrounded by phonies. They're all out there. And again, that doesn't mean all your friends out there that talk shit or bullshit. You got to start calling them out, calling them assholes or calling them phonies, but let them know you're not going to tolerate a lot of their bullshit, because it never ends sometimes. And I get we all bullshit at times. That's what makes things funny too. But there's a fine line there between being taken advantage of or taking advantage of others. All right. Take care, and I wish you nothing but the best. And if you're traveling, safe travels.